keep aside that kind of money just because we don't have a law in this country to authorize the regulators for bilateral netting out rather than grossing out. So when two parties, if I have to very, very simply put it, sir, if two parties are engaging in a contract, one has to pay the other 100 rupees, the other had to pay 210 rupees. The end of the day, only 110 rupees will have to be exchanged because this and that would be netted out. Whereas now what happens is this one keeps aside for the 100 rupees and that one keeps aside for 210 rupees. End of the day, everybody is calculating risk on the basis of what they are facing rather than netting what exactly the financial market will face. And end of the day, everybody is locking more money for just facing risk. So this particular legislation that we are engaging in is so necessary for the stability of the financial market. Otherwise, banks, each one of them are locking up money, and that money is not available for our economic activity. End of the day, locked up money remains locked up. Economy is starved of funds. If the lesson enhances liquidity into the market, and therefore what happens is economy gets greater lubrication to move rather than sit and wait for that locked up assets to get released. So these are the essential points, sir. I would just highlight that the benefits that the country will derive from this exercise would be the financial sector would be greater resilient for this particular act which is coming in. Second, it will reduce the price of derivative products on account of optimal utilization of all the capital which will be available and enable banks to increase credit limits because they'll have more money now. They will have greater credit limits for counterparties and clients. Then Honorable Member Suresh Prabhu raised this point. Corporate bond markets will get energized. India is in the process of, in fact, Suresh Prabhuji asks for a roadmap, which in a way I have mentioned during my budget speech. So corporate bond markets will be greatly energized because the credit default swap markets will be better functioning now. And finally, sir, business exits also will be having better recovery. Business exits will be better because improved recovery mechanisms will happen for financial contracts. To that extent, the IBC also will have a bearing in that this particular legislation will have to that limited extent, supersedence over the IBC itself. So there are one or two other points which I would like to highlight. This will happen. This bilateral netting legislation will help us in evaluating risks far more in real-time basis, and actual risk assessment happens rather than a notional risk assessment based on the gross figures. It is the net which is important, otherwise the real value of money is locked up. So with largely these kind of benefits which are so clearly standing out, it's important for us to recognize how much of a milestone this legislation, if passed today, will have. So one or two points which are specifically raised by Suresh Prabhuji was that, will individuals be affected? Will you be micromanaging it? He's a very qualified chartered accountant and also knows quite a few things about financial market. He raised this very important point. I respect him for that. The individual is eligible for netting benefits, but however, the counterparty to such transaction must be an entity regulated by the authority who's enlisted in the first schedule of the bill. In other words, a bilateral financial contract entered between the two individuals is not per se eligible but for netting and other counterparty must be a regulated entity. And that list is very clearly given by us in the schedule itself. So what kind of things are covered under this bill and what are not covered? With that, I will conclude, sir. The bill covers financial contracts which are entered into on a bilateral basis, which is outside of the clearing system. This bill will empower financial regulators, that is RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, PFRDA, which is the Provident Fund Regulatory, IFSC, all authorities who we mentioned in the Schedule 1 of this Act. They will be notifying the contract under its purview as qualified financial contractor. So typically, the types of trades that are negotiated bilaterally, which will get included here, are swaps, forwards, and certain complex options. So some of the contracts which are going to get covered under the bill are cross-currency or interest rate swaps or commodity swaps. Spot, future, or forward foreign exchange transaction gets covered here. Currency or interest rate future or option gets covered here. Credit derivatives such as the credit default swap gets covered here. Very important in today's global strategy and economy. Commodity derivatives such as electricity derivatives, oil derivatives, coal derivatives, or gas derivatives get also covered. So with this, just one bullet which I'm telling you, commodity derivatives such as electricity derivatives, oil derivatives, coal derivatives, or gas derivatives. You can immediately imagine what are the kind of transactions which are going to get covered because of this legislation that this House is choosing to consider today. This bill, if passed, will have a very big